So for part 2 of the slab building project, what I want to do is I'm going to make a slab form that I'm actually folding up into separate sides to construct something using slabs. I'm going to make a little template for each side. So what I did is I drew kind of a top and bottom, and I just used the edge of the card, held this up so that I had nice parallel lines, and then I just found an angle that I thought was pleasing. I took this little bit of cardstock I had folded earlier, and I hold it right here in the corner, and then I mark on it right here where it meets that corner. And so when I bring it over here, I'll determine the width that I want there, and then I just rotate this until this corner meets the bottom line. And what that does is it's going to make sure that there's symmetry between the two sides, because these lengths are the same. Great, so I have my initial shape. Now I'm going to take my cardboard box, and I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to trace Once I have it traced, I'm going to scoot it over right next to the first form, and I'm going to trace again. So as soon as you have at least 3 of these, then you're going to be able to create a volumetric object, a 3D object, because it will have at least 3 sides. One other way in which you can make templates for volumetric shapes is there is a great website if you have access to a printer, and it's called templatemaker.nl, and on there you just type in the dimensions and the type. You select the type of shape you want and then the dimensions that you would like it at, and it will create a PDF of what that template would look like. And I will often use that. I'll print it out when I'm in the studio, which at home I don't have a printer, so I don't have access to that tool, but it is a great resource. But we're doing everything DIY today, so this works just as well. Great. So here is my second template. So I started with just one of these, and I radiated it outward. So now what I can do, just to give you a sense of what it is going to look like as an object, you just are going to crease it on each of those folds. So now this template will make this object. Right? Does that make sense how that goes together? That was a rhetorical question. You're watching a video. So I could make a couple of these, and I could make one for the bottom and then put another one on top, and then I would have a vase that goes out and then goes back in. So what I need to do is I need to make a slab that is at least this big. So I started a slab the same way, kind of packed it together, pounded it out. So this is a little bit more complicated of a technique, but if you grab the slab on the end and you pull it across your body, it'll stretch it out kind of like a pizza dough. It can be a little bit difficult to do that, so you can just keep pounding it from the center out towards the edges or use a rolling pin. I am almost there. Great. So if you have trouble stretching out a slab like that, don't fret. It just takes a little bit of practice to get that. So again, I'm going to smooth out that slab. Even if you're adding texture to your slab, it is a good idea to smooth it and compress it with either a credit card or a rib. All right. Just wanted to get, there was a hump right in the middle that I wanted to get out. Great. So now I can take my slab or my template, lay it on my slab. And I'm gonna set it face down so it doesn't keep curling up on me. It says this can help with cholesterol. Okay, so I'm going to make blunt cuts, just straight up and down with the knife on the outside edge. And the outside edge only. For this edge, because it is going to be connecting with this one, I need to cut with the knife going under the template, tip of the blade going under the template, and then I go over here to this side and I want the tip of the knife away from the template so that there's extra on this side. So the blade was held pointing from my right hand towards my left side, and then same over here. So I didn't change the angle of the knife. I held that and then I came over to this side and cut. For the bottom here, I'm just going to cut with a slight bevel, because if the walls of the piece are angling out and you've cut the bottom straight, then it's going to tip up on the inside. So I want to cut this with a slight angle. Great. So all of this excess comes away. And since I cut my knife at an angle like this, that means this top side is the inside of the form. So I'm going to just go back to using this piece of paper, and instead of cutting with my knife, I'm just going to use something a little bit duller. So I'll just use one of these Bic pens, and I'm just going to create a little crease. It's gonna kind of like creasing paper. It's gonna give me a little bit of memory for the clay to fold there a little bit straighter. Excuse me, I've been waiting for that sneeze. Okay, so if you can see that all right, have my template. It's cut a little beveled. The bevel is on the inside of the cup. I've beveled the two outsides here. So before I fold it up, I'm just going to use this serrated edge, and I'm going to score on the two ends here. So you can lay it down on the table and score that. Then you always want to get a little bit of water. Do I have a brush? I don't really have a brush. I thought I did. Oh well, okay. So I'm just going to get a little bit of water on one side there. I'm going to flip it back over. And I'm going to use the whole palm of my hand to slowly lift that edge. If you have something that is kind of firm, maybe even more firm than that, that you can kind of press against, that's going to help it to crease a little straighter. So I'll just hold that there. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, it can just be a nice straight edge. Okay, I have my sides folded, and I have this beveled edge where it's going to connect. And I'm just going to kind of delicately get that seam lined up. I'm gonna just do an initial really gentle compression on the inside and outside of that seam. And I can clean that up a little bit later. I did get some cracks on the outside from folding it. So if I just support on the inside and I use that rib or a credit card, compress the clay on both of those sides, you should see those cracks disappear without altering the form too much or distorting it. So I'm just going to go ahead and give each of those little vertical lines a little bit of love. Here's the seam, same thing. Just supporting on the inside while I am pressing quite gently with the rib. But this is helping to not only get rid of the cracks, it's also helping to just define where those edges are. Great. So there is one. It could have a bottom put on it. I could just take the spare slab that I have, and don't cut this slab ahead of time. I'll just take this object and I'll place it right in the middle so there's a little bit of overhang on all sides. Just enough room. Great. I'm just going to trace out where it sits on the slab. Doesn't have to be super accurate, but we're going to want to score to attach these together. So here is my little template. I'm going to use this serrated rib, and I'm going to score on the inside of the line I drew, because inside of that line is where this cup sat. I guess it's a cup. or the bottom part of a cylinder, or a bottom part of a vase. All right, so I scored that. I'll also flip this over, and I'll use the serrated rib to score that up as well. You can see that the bottom here is flat because we cut that at a bevel. And just getting a little water on there. If you do have a brush, I prefer that so you're only getting water on the part that you're attaching so you don't have overspray. But this does work as well. Okay, so I have both sides scored. So if I just put even pressure on top and kind of wiggle the form, and then I'm going to reach down towards the base, and I'm really going to get better compression if I'm not trying to press the whole thing. If you press too hard from up here, eventually the walls will buckle. So I want to see little air bubbles kind of squirt out of the seam, and that tells me I've gotten enough compression between the top and the bottom. Now that it is attached, I'll take my dollar store knife and I'm going to cut it, trying to follow the same angle that the side is. Great. So there's the bottom. It's cut and attached. It needs to just be blended in. So I can use that rib. And instead of pulling up, you want to pull parallel with the seam. The reason being is that this bottom slab is solid clay, but as soon as I get above that line, the walls are thin, and so the amount of resistance going against the rib, if I was to pull up, it would get right above the bottom slab and then it would dip in and it would highlight where the connection is. Whereas if I drag it parallel, then it's continuing this line up the side and will help it to disappear. So on the inside, my finger is just kind of supporting the wall of the cup so that in case this wants to dip in, it's not really able to, it's just giving a little bit more resistance. So that's quite a bit better. I can take the whole cup and just tap it down a little bit, get a little bit better compression. Here's the inside. If you have messy seams, you can just use a ballpoint pen. I would wait for it to stiffen up for maybe a half an hour, and then you would just trace the seam. You can also just use a wet brush, and you can brush the seams, and that's going to clean them up for you. So here's my dish and my cup and saucer. Thanks for watching.